They say the silence was worse than the screaming. Summer, 1462. Imagine you are a soldier in the most feared army on earth. You have shattered the walls of Constantinople. You have brought kings to their knees. You are marching into a tiny land called Wallachia, expecting a quick victory. But then, the wind changes. It isn't a battle cry you hear. It's the smell, a heavy, rotting sweetness that clings to your skin. Your horse stops. Your breath catches. And as you crest the hill, you see it. A forest, but not of trees. 20,000 human beings. Your brothers, your comrades, lifted high into the air on greased wooden stakes, arranged in perfect geometric lines. Some are black and bloated. Others are still twisting, still gasping, still dying. Your sultan, the conqueror of the world, covers his face and turns away. What kind of man does this? History calls him a monster. But to the men who stood in that forest, trembling in their armor, he was something far worse. He was the only man whose cruelty shocked even the devil. To understand the monster, we must first meet the boy. The year is 1442. Vlad is 11 years old. To save his throne, his father gives him up as collateral to the Ottoman Sultan. Young Vlad was taken deep into the Ottoman Empire, not to a dungeon, but to a palace. This is where the history books get it wrong. They call it captivity. It was actually a classroom. For 6 years, he lived in the shadow of the executioner. He watched how the Ottomans ruled through absolute fear. He saw men flayed alive for disobedience. He watched his own younger brother, Radu, slowly fall in love with their captors, becoming the Sultan's favorite. But Vlad did not break. He hardened. He realized that in a world of wolves, you cannot be a sheep. You must become a dragon. He was building a library of pain in his mind. He was learning that to defeat a monster, you didn't need to be a hero. You needed to be a worse monster. When Vlad finally returned to Wallachia at age 17, he found his home destroyed. His father had been assassinated. His older brother, Mircea, had been buried alive by the local nobles, the Boyars. Vlad was alone. He had no army. He had no allies. But he had a plan. In 1456, he invited the very nobles who had killed his family to a grand Easter feast. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of boyars dressed in their finest silks, drinking Vlad's wine, laughing, thinking they could control this young prince just like they controlled his father. In the middle of the feast, the music stopped. Vlad stood up. He asked them a simple question. How many princes have you lived through? The nobles laughed. They bragged. 7, 12, 30. They were proud of their treachery. They were telling him to his face, "We are the true rulers here." Vlad smiled. And then he gave the signal. The doors were barred. The guards drew their swords. The oldest nobles, the ones who had buried his brother, were impaled right there on the palace grounds. But for the younger, stronger ones, Vlad had a worse fate in mind. He stripped them of their fine clothes and marched them 50 miles into the mountains. There, he forced them to build his fortress, Poenari Castle. They worked until their clothes rotted off their bodies. They worked until they dropped dead from exhaustion. And when they died, he simply replaced them with the next batch. Within months, Vlad had wiped out the entire corrupt nobility and replaced them with men who owed him everything. He had secured his power. Now he turned his eyes to the empire. Fast forward to 1459. Sultan Mehmed II sent envoys to demand tribute. The envoys entered Vlad's court wearing their turbans. When Vlad asked them to remove their headgear, they refused, citing their religious custom. Vlad nodded thoughtfully. He said, "I wish to strengthen you in your custom." He ordered his guards to seize them, and right there, in the throne room, he had their turbans nailed to their skulls. He sent them back to Constantinople still alive, screaming with iron spikes driven into their heads. It was a declaration of war, but Vlad knew he couldn't win on the battlefield. The Ottoman army was 90,000 strong. Vlad had less than 30,000, so he turned to his masterpiece, the stake. We need to talk about the impalement, because it wasn't just execution, it was engineering. Vlad's method was designed for suffering that lasted for days. He used a rounded, greased stake. It was inserted carefully to avoid the heart and major arteries. Then the victim was hoisted upright. Gravity did the rest. The body's own weight would slowly pull the victim down the stake. It was a slow-motion torture that could last for 48 hours. There are reports, written by terrifying German merchants, that Vlad would dine among the dying. Picture it, a table set with fine food and wine, surrounded by a forest of groaning, dying men. Vlad dipping his bread, enjoying his meal, completely unmoved by the smell of blood or the sound of agony. Whether this is propaganda or truth, the message was clear. I am beyond your definition of horror. By 1462, the Sultan had had enough. He marched north to crush this little prince. Vlad couldn't win a fair fight, so he didn't fight fair. He burned his own villages. He poisoned his own wells. He slaughtered his own livestock so the Ottomans would find nothing to eat. He turned Wallachia into a graveyard before the enemy even arrived. And then came the night attack. June 17th, 1462. The Ottoman camp was asleep. 90,000 men, confident in their numbers. They didn't know that Vlad had been watching them from the shadows. In the dead of night, torches suddenly flared. Vlad led a suicide squad of 7,000 men straight into the heart of the enemy camp. They wore Ottoman uniforms to confuse the guards. They spoke Turkish to give false orders. Their target wasn't the army. It was the Sultan's tent. They cut through the elite janissaries like a scythe through wheat. For hours, they killed in the confusion. The panic was so absolute that Ottoman soldiers started killing each other in the dark. Vlad didn't get the Sultan that night, but he achieved something more important. He proved that even surrounded by the greatest army on earth, the Sultan wasn't safe. He proved that in Wallachia, the night belongs to the dragon. The Sultan survived, but he was shaken. He ordered his army to march on to the capital, Targoviste, hoping to end this nightmare once and for all. But Vlad had one final lesson left to teach. When the Ottoman army finally reached the capital, the gates were open. The city was quiet. There were no soldiers on the walls. Instead, there was the forest, a field 2 miles long and 1 mile wide, filled with 20,000 wooden stakes, and on every stake, a body. The Sultan's scouts stopped. Their horses refused to move forward. The smell was so thick it could be tasted. It wasn't just a massacre, it was art. Vlad had arranged the bodies in geometric patterns, circles within circles. He had placed the highest-ranking Ottoman captives on the tallest stakes, raised above the rest like a grotesque court of the dead. And there, towering above them all, was Hamza Pasha, the Sultan's favorite general, still wearing his rotting uniform. the Ottoman soldiers, men who had conquered empires, men who had seen the worst of war, began to vomit. Some fell to their knees and wept. They could fight an enemy they could see, but they could not fight this. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, looked out at the forest of his own dead men and uttered the famous words, "I cannot take the land from a man who does such marvels." It was a twisted compliment. He was admitting defeat, not military defeat, but psychological defeat. He turned his army around and marched home. Vlad the Impaler had done the impossible. He had defeated the Ottoman Empire using nothing but wood, gravity, and absolute terror. But here's the tragedy of the monster. The weapon Vlad forged to save his country eventually turned in his hand. You cannot turn terror on and off like a tap. To maintain his power, Vlad began to use the stake on everyone. Merchants who overcharged, women who were unfaithful, entire villages that whispered against him. His people stopped seeing him as a protector. They started seeing him as the devil. The Ottomans didn't need to defeat Vlad with soldiers. They defeated him with politics. They sent Vlad's own younger brother, Radu, the handsome, soft-spoken favorite of the Sultan, to take the throne. Radu offered the people peace. Vlad offered them only more stakes. The choice was easy. Vlad was betrayed by his own nobles. He was forced to flee. He spent 12 years in prison, forgotten by the world he had saved. When he finally returned to reclaim his throne in 1476, he was a shadow of his former self. He ruled for barely 2 months before he was killed in battle. Some say he was struck down by the Turks. Others say his own men stabbed him in the back, tired of the bloodshed. His head was cut off, preserved in a jar of honey, and sent to Constantinople. The Sultan finally got his trophy. Today, if you walk the streets of Romania, you will find statues of Vlad. They remember him as a hero, a man who did the unthinkable to survive the impossible. The rest of the world remembers him as Dracula, a vampire, a myth, but the truth is scarier than any vampire story, because vampires aren't real. Vlad was. He was a human boy, twisted by a cruel world until he became a mirror of its violence. He showed us that the line between a savior and a monster is sometimes just a matter of perspective. He saved his country, but to do it, he had to lose his soul. And in the end, looking back at the forest of 20,000 screaming men, we are left with one uncomfortable question. Did he defeat the darkness, or did he just become it? If you want to uncover more of history's darkest secrets, subscribe to the Scarlet Archives. Because the scariest monsters aren't under your bed. They're in the history books.